Changli has come home, and so has Kuro Games to collect our wallets. Changli is the new 5-star fusion resonator that is going to shake up the meta of Wuthering waves by being a character that can play both the role of a main DPS and a sub DPS, all the while doing crazy damage and looking beautiful. And she was actually buffed from the closed beta tests to the live servers, which is even more exciting. So in today's guide we're going to be covering how to optimize Changli. That is to say, what are her best rotations, recommended stats, weapons and echoes, and if it's worth it for you to get her signature weapon or any resonance chain sequence. And finally, what are her best teams both as a hyper carry and as a sub DPS. All of that so that you can get the most value out of your account. With that being said, hello everyone, my name is DarkHero and let's get started. On screen here you can see the upgrade materials for Changli in case you want to farm some of these ahead of time. Now when taking a look at Changli's base stats, she actually has the highest base attack out of the entire cast in the game, which is naturally going to allow her to deal more damage. Speaking of which, let's now go over Changli's kit so that you know how exactly you are going to be playing as Changli and how to optimize her. Kuro Games have once again made skill descriptions overly complicated, but in fact Changli is actually pretty simple to play. Changli is able to perform a basic attack combo comprised of 4 different attacks that will deal fusion damage, and you can also cast them in the air. And while you are in the air, if you hold the basic attack, you're going to perform a plunge instead. And while Changli is on the ground, using her heavy attack will propel you into the air, which will then allow you to continue of course with the mid-air combo. And whenever you perform your full basic attack combo, Changli will enter what is called the true sight state. This state is going to last for 12 seconds and is going to modify the way that Changli plays. And while Changli is on the ground with the true sight state active, by using the normal attack, she will be able to dash towards the enemy and instantly attack them with 3 hits of her sword. However, if Changli has true sight active and she is in the air, she will turn into a phoenix and dash towards the enemies to deal a lot of fusion damage. And you can of course also follow it up by doing a plunge attack. And the cool thing about the true sight is that all of these attacks are going to be counted as resonant skill damage instead of basic attack damage. Which takes us to the Forte circuit. Changli can hold up to 4 stacks of inflammament, which you can check at all times on her Forte gauge. And she will be gaining these stacks by either hitting the enemy during true sight, gaining 1 stack per attack, or by using the resonance liberation, which will allow her to get all 4 stacks in an instant. And whenever Changli has all 4 stacks, she'll be able to modify the way that her heavy attack is going to work, as by using it she will consume all 4 stacks and perform a special attack that is going to be called the Flaming Sacrifice. That again she can perform both while on the ground but also in the air. And once again, Flaming Sacrifice is going to be counted as resonant skill damage. Naturally, Flaming Sacrifice is going to be dealing a ton of damage, as it is going to be the core mechanic that Changli is going to revolve around. However, additionally, whenever you perform it, you're going to be getting a 40% damage reduction, and if Flaming Sacrifice, the modified heavy attack, is used within 10 seconds after casting the Resonance Liberation, aka your ultimate, Changli's attack will be increased by 25%. And again, given that whenever you cast the Resonance Liberation, which creates this fire explosion, dealing massive fusion damage in an area, Changli will immediately max out her Forte gauge, thus getting all 4 of the true sight charges, which means that she'll be able to use the modified heavy attack within that 10-second time window very easily. As for Changli's resonant skill, whenever you perform it, Changli will dash towards the target and will launch herself into the air all the while attacking the enemy. And not only does the resonant skill also provide you with additional true sight charges, but it can also be directly followed up with a plunge into a basic attack combo to get those stacks very easily. But on top of all of that, the resonant skill can be cast in mid-air as well as on the ground, and Changli can hold 2 different charges of the skill, which quite simply means that you'll be able to use it more often. Now, as you can see, despite the walls of text that we get with each different skill, Changli's overall playstyle is actually pretty simple. You quite simply use a mix of your basic attacks with your resonant skill to build up your gauge to use your modified heavy attack to deal more damage. And whenever possible, using your ultimate will allow you to use that modified heavy attack that will also give you a 25% attack boost. Now that being said, there is a bit more nuance to this. And so let's go over Changli's inherent skills as well as the intro and the outro skills before we take a look at the optimal damage rotations. The Secret Strategist passive is going to increase Changli's true sight attacks damage by an additional 5% fusion damage bonus for every inflammament stack that you have, up to 20% whenever you have all 4 stacks. Though keep in mind that this extra fusion damage does not apply to any other move in her kit. As for Sweeping Force, this passive is going to significantly increase the damage of Changli's modified heavy attack, the Flaming Sacrifice, by making it deal an additional 20% fusion damage bonus on top of ignoring 15% of the enemy's defense. Though again, just like before, this passive is going to only affect the Flaming Sacrifice and not any other skill in her kit, though it should be noted that it is going to result in a lot more damage. Now, as for Changli's intro skill, it is quite simply going to be dealing heavy fusion damage, but you get the added benefit of immediately entering True Sight whenever you use it. And since the intro skill's animation finishes with Changli still in the air, you can follow it up by using a plunging attack to deal more damage. And you can of course then follow it up with a full combo, so you can see how fluid this character is going to play out. As for her outro skill, Changli is going to provide the next character that enters the field a 20% fusion damage deepen and 25% resonance liberation damage deepen, lasting for 10 seconds. And this outro skill is what is going to allow Changli to be a very powerful sub DPS character, and then swap into a fusion character that is going to get all of that extra damage, have that character use all of their rotations very quickly, and then swap back into Changli to deal even more damage. And naturally, whenever we go over the best team section, I'll talk about what exactly are the best characters that are going to be taking the most advantage out of this. Now that we have gone over Changli's kit, it is very important that we go over her optimal damage rotations. Changli's rotations are overall pretty short, as you'll be able to perform them in less than 12 seconds, which is why she's going to excel as a quick swap character. Though again, as I said before, if you do want to play Changli as a main DPS, you'll be able to. Still, I'm going to be going over the damage rotations in a way that I hope is going to be clear to you what you need to do at each different point in your rotation. So if you start off with Changli, let's say you are at the Tower of Adversity, and you have your ultimate from the very beginning, you can quite simply start by using your Resonance Liberation and follow it up with your special modified heavy attack, Flaming Sacrifice, that you can cancel the end leg of the animation and swap to a different character, which would ideally be Verina, so that she is able to then swap into a different character, provide the 30-second damage buff, and so your secondary DPS is going to do their rotation, all within a pretty short time span, and then swap back into Changli. And again, given that her overall rotation is going to be less than 12 seconds, you should have plenty of time to execute what I'm about to tell you. So you would start off by using your intro skill, and since Changli's intro skill leaves her in the middle of the air, you can immediately go into your True Sight charge and then go into the mid-air heavy attack. From there, you finish your basic attack combo into your True Sight heavy attack, and now you will want to fill up the rest of your inflammament stacks, so use your resonance skill into the True Sight attack and follow it up by using your resonance skill again into, one more time, the True Sight attack. At this point, your forte gauge is going to be full, so go ahead and use the modified heavy attack, Flaming Sacrifice. And by this point, your resonance liberation should already be up, so go ahead and use it and follow it up by using once again the modified heavy attack, Flaming Sacrifice, that you can cancel the end animation and swap into a different character. It may seem somewhat confusing, but it's an overall very simple rotation to use. And if you are wondering when do you slot in your echo in the middle of the combo, quite honestly, you try to use it as early as possible so that you get the extra fusion damage from it, though personally I like to use it after I finish my first combo and before I use my resonance skill. And do keep in mind that you don't exactly need to follow this precise rotation, as depending on the enemies that you are fighting, the team composition that you are playing with, and the energy regeneration that you have, we'll address all of this with more detail in a little bit. Depending on all those factors, you may want to cancel that rotation earlier to swap into a different character. But that flexibility in her damage rotation is another one of Changli's benefits. That being said, let's now go over Changli's best weapons. I will be going through each of them individually, and then I will show you a graph comparing how each of them is going to perform in comparison to each other, so that you can get an accurate understanding of how powerful these weapons are going to be for Changli. Starting of course with her signature weapon, the Blazing Brilliance. This weapon is not only going to provide Changli with almost 50% crit damage, but it's also going to provide a 12% attack increase on top of a massive resonant skill damage bonus that will ramp up in accordance to how many stacks of this weapon you have, increasing your resonant skill damage from 4% all the way up to 56%. And naturally, this weapon is going to be by far Changli's best weapon. That being said, the next best option might actually surprise you as to how effective it can be on Changli, and it is none other than the Emerald of Genesis, the 5-star sword that you can get from the weapon selector. On top of providing you with a lot of base attack and crit rate on top, this weapon is also going to give you energy regen and will make it so that whenever you use a resonant skill will increase your your attack by 6%, going up to 12%. And given that Changli has 2 different charges for her skill, means that she is of course going to heavily benefit from having a weapon that can take advantage of those 2 charges. And as you will see in a moment in the graph, the Emerald of Genesis is actually pretty close in performance to the signature weapon, so at the very least I would recommend you to get this one. Now as for the 4-star weapons, my first recommendation is going to be the Commando of Conviction, which whenever you use the intro skill will increase your attack by 15%, lasting for 15 seconds. It's a very simple effect on a weapon that comes with a very high base attack, though not as high as the 5-star weapons of course. Still, it should be noted that it is a very simple effect that is pretty much always going to be active on Changli, that is, unless you are planning on using Changli as a main DPS that likes to stay on field for a very long time, at which point the 15-second duration of the effect would eventually run out and you would lose access to that 15% attack increase. Now the next 4-star weapon that I would recommend is going to be the Lunar Cutter. This sword is very similar to the Commando of Conviction, where you get an attack increase, though in this case the amount of attack that you gain is going to be reduced over time, but if you defeat an enemy you'll be able to refresh the stacks and get back some of the duration of that effect. Overall, it is pretty much just a downgrade over the Commando of Conviction, though they are very much comparable when it comes to effectiveness. Now the next weapon is going to be the Lumen Gloss, the 4-star sword that you can get from the Battle Pass. And honestly, it's not very good, as its effect is going to increase your basic attack damage and heavy attack damage. But as I explained before, Changli's damage output is pretty much all going to come from resonant skill damage, which means that she is not going to make good use of this effect, and so given how limited the Battle Pass weapons are going to be, I would recommend against getting the Lumen Gloss. And finally, the Sword of Night is going to be a decent free-to-play alternative, though of course it is going to lag behind all the other weapons in the list. Now here you can see the final graph containing the comparison between all the different weapons, both at Ascension rank 1 and 5, and you can really see just how much more powerful the Emerald of Genesis is over the 4-star weapons. And given that the difference between the Emerald of Genesis and the Blazing Brilliance at R1 is only that of 10%, I would strongly encourage everyone that wants to play Changli to get the Emerald of Genesis, since it is a weapon that is going to be very much universal, so you'll be able to use it on a lot more different teams and characters. And the overall effectiveness between the Emerald of Genesis and the Blazing Brilliance really isn't that big of a deal. That being said, let's now go over Changli's best echoes as well as the recommended stats that you should prioritize. So when it comes to the echo set, you will want to prioritize the Molten Rift set, as it is going to increase your fusion damage by 10% and an additional 30% whenever you use a resonant skill, which again you're going to be doing a lot of that with Changli. Alternatively, you could go for a 2-piece Molten Rift set with 2-piece Lingering Tunes, which would provide you with an additional 10% attack bonus, though it really wouldn't be as powerful as a 5-piece Molten set. Now as for the echoes to use for Changli, the main echo that I would recommend is of course going to be the Inferno Rider, as it is the only 4-cost fusion echo that we have, and its effect is going to provide you with a significant fusion damage bonus. And in terms of stats, you will want to prioritize having as much crit rate and crit damage as possible, followed by of course fusion damage and attack percent, but also making sure that you get around 20% extra energy regen, just so that you are able to play around your rotations comfortably. And of course, going with an echo distribution of 4-3-3-1-1 is going to be more beneficial than going with 4-4-1-1-1, though the latter may end up being more beneficial to you if you end up being unlucky when it comes to getting the substats. Now if you are someone that enjoys Changli's big personalities, then you may also want to invest into some of our resonance chain sequences. So let's go over all of them and tell you which ones are going to be more beneficial. Our first sequence is going to increase the damage of our resonance skill, as well as the modified heavy attack Flaming Sacrifice by 10%, and also give Changli resistance to interruption. It's an overall nice quality of life improvement, though it's not going to result in a lot more damage. Now her second sequence is quite simply going to increase Changli's crit rate by 25% whenever she maxes out her Inflammament stacks. Playing around this sequence will allow you to remove some crit rate from your build, and that would of course result in you being much more powerful and consequently dealing a lot more damage. Now her third sequence is pretty simple. It's quite simply an 80% damage increase on her ultimate. Now if this was an 80% damage increase on resonant skill damage, it would be insane. But since it's only for the resonance liberation, it's a nice damage bonus on top, though when taking your full rotation into account, it's going to result in less than a 10% damage increase. Changli's fourth sequence is going to provide a 20% attack increase for the entire party whenever she uses her intro skill. And this sequence is naturally going to improve the damage that Changli is going to be able to dish out, but it's also going to help accelerate the quick swap teams and help them deal a lot more damage. Now the fifth sequence is actually pretty crazy, as it is going to increase the damage multiplier on the modified heavy attack Flaming Sacrifice by 50% and will increase the damage that it deals on top by an additional 50%. And this is going to result in a massive damage spike, though of course you would need to dig deep into your wallet to be able to get this. And her final sequence is even more powerful. It is quite simply going to add a 40% defense shred to not only your ultimate, but your resonant skill as well as your Flaming Sacrifice. And as you can expect from the final sequence, this really is going to break Changli and make her destroy the entire game. Although of course you will need to destroy your wallet first to be able to get this. If you just want to get a couple of extra copies for Changli, then her second sequence is going to be very powerful, though she is still going to have an excellent performance even if you don't get multiple copies of her. And naturally, if you want to summon for multiple Changlis, I would recommend you to get her signature weapon first. That being said, after all of this, let's now go over Changli's best teams, because there are actually quite a few different ones that are going to allow you to optimize Changli to be either a main DPS or alternatively play as a sub DPS. It should be noted that Changli is going to excel in a quick swap team, as her rotations are fairly short and she's able to provide a meaningful damage bonus to her teammates. And given that Changli's outro skill is not only going to increase the damage of Resonance Liberation, but will also boost fusion damage, then naturally Changli is going to pair very well with another fusion character. And thus, in my opinion, the very best Changli team is going to be comprised of Changli coupled with Encore, and then having Verina in the final slot for your support. Now on paper, this team is going to destroy the entire game, as Encore is already by herself one of the most powerful characters in the entire game. Her damage is outrageous, and the fact that you can cancel out of her animations very easily means that she is going to excel in a quick swap team. However, it should be noted that this team is going to be very much skill dependent, as Encore's optimal damage rotations do take quite some time to learn and get used to. And of course, you will want to make sure that you are rotating between Encore, Changli and Verina at the right time, so that you are able to maintain a perfect uptime on each of their different buffs. Alternatively, a much easier team to play around with would be to replace Encore with Chixia, because her rotations are very quick and easy to pilot, and since she is another fusion character, she's going to benefit from the extra damage that Changli is going to provide. That being said, another very powerful team that you're able to play around with Changli is going to be to replace the second slot character with the Havoc Rover, because the Havoc MC also likes to play in quick swap teams and also has a very short rotation, which means that you're going to have plenty of time to be able to go back to Changli or even go back to Verina and reapply the buff. This team is going to feel very natural for just about any player, though comparatively it is going to lag behind a little bit compared to the other teams. That being said, a very powerful character that is going to couple very well with Changli is going to be none other than Yangyang. Yangyang is also a character that has very short burst rotations, but on top of that, she is able to consistently keep on dealing damage while off field, and the overall accumulated damage from this team is going to be crazy. And again, given that Yangyang likes to spend very little time on field, means that with this team you'll essentially be able to play Changli as if she were a main DPS. Though of course you should try to match your rotations to the duration of the buffs. So given that the extra damage from Verina's outro skill lasts for 30 seconds, you would ideally only spend around 10 seconds or less with Yangyang and then spend the remaining 20 seconds with Changli before you swap back into Verina to reapply the same buff. Now, if you truly want to play Changli as the main DPS and only want to see big numbers with this character, then you will want to pair Changli up with none other than Taoqi. And with this, you will have what I call the double G Cubs team. The reason why Taoqi is going to pair up well with Changli is that Taoqi's outro skill Iron Will provide a 38% resonant skill damage deepen for 14 seconds to the next character. And since Changli is all about the resonant skill damage, Taoqi really is going to be the #1 character to boost that specific damage. Now, me personally, I don't like to play with Taoqi. I don't think that she is a very powerful unit, as she doesn't feel very impactful whenever I'm playing as her. You are kind of dependent on the enemy AI to trigger the parries, and she also feels very slow to play. That being said, it should not be denied that this resonant skill damage buff is going to be very powerful on Changli, and thus, if you really enjoy Changli's design and overall gameplay feel, not to mention her aesthetics, then I imagine that you will enjoy Taoqi's aesthetics as well, and she is going to be the perfect pair. And naturally, the reason why Verina is pretty much on all of these teams is that she is by far the best support character that we have in the game, as not only is she able to heal her allies, but her outro skill provides a meaningful damage buff for 30 seconds. Taoqi is going to be a very powerful character in the meta of Wuthering Waves, and she is going to become even better over time as we get brand new fusion characters that are going to be added to the list that are going to benefit from Changli's assets. And I should also mention that Changli is just very fun to play. With that being said, let me know if you guys are going to be pulling for Changli, and subscribe to win your next 50-50. If you lose, I owe you a donut.